Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here is your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
My oh my friends, so much to get to today. Things we didn't get to yesterday, talking here about this third attempted assassination of President Donald Trump. We've got Karoline Leavitt out there telling folks that the Democrat Party is to blame. She brings the receipts and at least her version of the people who are, well, her version of what caused this, her belief about what caused this, which she's not entirely wrong on this. Certainly there is rhetoric out there that the left has been celebrating. I don't know if all the examples are accurate, but her point is well taken. We'll talk about that. There were some things yesterday that I couldn't get to, including Trump's response to a question from Peter Doocy. He asked why this keeps happening, why Donald Trump's life is continually being at risk here. We'll talk about that. There's just a lot to get to, my friends. We've got SE Cupp. I mentioned that yesterday. I didn't have time to get to that. I'm going to do my level best here to get to everything that I can today in my stack of stuff. And by the way, you can get the stack of stuff so you can dive deeper into what we're talking about here, and you can get all the exclusive bonus content that we talk about in the Inner Circle email, the newsletter, if you will, simply by texting the word truth to 317-785-1030. Again, text truth to 317-785-1030. Friends, ever notice how some families seem to have a plan that lasts for generations? That is not by accident. Full Suite Wealth works with people who want their wealth to make a difference for years to come. Their team brings together high-level investment strategies like private equity, private credit, option strategies, coupled with legal guidance as well. It's all about making sure your vision becomes a reality for the people you love today, tomorrow, and well into the future. If you're looking to do more than just manage money, if you want to leave your mark, if you want to build something lasting, take a look at Full Suite Wealth. Visit their website now at fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. I don't know how to do this today other than just get into this and go through this and try to cover as much as I can. And that's what we're going to do. Let's see here. On, what is today? The Tuesday. So on Saturday, late Saturday night after the shooting, if you remember after the attempted assassination, I know just what happened there. We won't go through all the details, but the attempted assassination on Saturday at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, D.C. at the Hilton there. The initial plan was to go back and complete the event, and Trump wanted to do that. That was eventually stopped. There ended up being a press conference late that night, and Peter Doocy asked the president a question. Why does this keep happening to you? I want to play what Trump said in response and talk about this briefly. I want to get through as much of this as I can because there's a lot of stuff, and it's going to continue. It's going to continue. It's going to be like drinking from a fire hydrant, as they say. A lot of information that's going to be coming, a lot of developments, a lot of argument. Here we are in an election year. In fact, it's primary season here in my state. Final days to go vote. You can go early vote or you can go on election day, but we only have a short time remaining here before primary season in Indiana is over. Your state may have had a primary, have one coming up, but the general election, the midterm election, is here in November. This is an important election. We got things that are happening with redistricting and all that stuff, just all this stuff in the background. And now we've got political violence coming out the wazoo here with, again, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but just political violence from people who I dare say are not, this is not about mental illness. If you're in the business of mental health, I'm not trying to knock on your profession. There certainly are people who need help with the struggles they have, psychological, whatever, however you want to frame these, that's certainly the case. But what I believe is even a bigger problem in this country is the spiritual health of our nation. Maybe not you personally. You maybe have a strong spiritual health because you are tightly connected to Almighty God, to Yahweh through his son Jesus. But there's a lot of spiritual illness out here, and that I think is what we are witnessing, what we're watching. By the way, we got the manifesto, supposedly the manifesto of this shooter, alleged shooter, which I, time permitting, will get to that thing as well. I'll tell you, yesterday I'd mentioned that there was reports that this was an anti-Christian bias from the shooter. I didn't, as I was reading what's been reported, I don't know if is this really it? I mean, who knows? I don't know, but I didn't catch that from the manifesto. In fact, it seems like the shooter was claiming he was a Christian, this is not Christian behavior. I can assure you of that. And that's something that pastors, there are some pastors who are willing to address these things head on, what's happening in our culture. And there are others who are not. And dare I say that is not a good idea. It's the job of you're shepherding your flock. And listen, I understand you don't want your sermon to become political, but that's not what's happened. What's happened, I guess it can happen, but that's not what I'm calling for. What I'm calling for are for pastors to stand up and to preach the truth, even if the left has hijacked it and made it into a political issue. That's what I'm calling for. Anyway, again, a lot to unpack here. Let's start with Peter Doocy asking President Trump Saturday night after the attempted assassination, the third one, by the way, why these things keep happening to him.
Respectfully, why do you think this keeps happening to you?
Well, I've studied assassinations, and I must tell you, the most impactful people, the people that do the most, you take a look at the people, Abraham Lincoln, you go through the people that have gone through this where they got them, but the people that do the most, the people that make the biggest impact, they're the ones that they go after.
And that's not there's a lot of truth there, right? If you are, I think sometimes we need to maybe take a step back and just think about these things and think about the forces and the ideas, the personalities, the people in the world here. And what we have is a perfect storm. And Karoline Leavitt, which I'll play a clip from her as well, calling out some of these Democrats for their violent rhetoric. What you have a system. And I'm not saying this is the only way that this can happen, but I think it's a common way that this happens. So in our nation was founded to be a nation where you and I and all of our citizens, all of our fellow Americans, our government was unique. I've gone through this before. When we won the American Revolution, the founders had a decision to make. The founders could say, we won, now we're going to be the ones who now rule America, and you all will be under our little tyranny. But see, the founders actually had principle when it came to what they believed about liberty, and that coming from God. They actually said, look, this isn't up to us. This isn't up to us here. We're going to remain consistent. We're not going to get a group of people that are in the inner circle, the ones that led this revolution and led the American people to victory. We're not going to get together and form our own little type of tyranny or oligarchy. We're not going to establish ourselves as the rulers and the folks who are going to run the show here. Instead, we're not going to form a government that then says, here's how things are going to happen. They did something revolutionary. The revolution did not end after we defeated the British in the Revolutionary War. That was the beginning. Now it was time for the revolutionary ideas to be implemented. And they said that you as a person are created in the image of God, that you receive by virtue of your birth, you receive certain unalienable rights. And they listed some of those: life, liberty, property, the pursuit of happiness. Talked about these and so forth. And they said, it's not our job to tell you how this country is going to run. In fact, what we're going to say and what we recognize is that you as free people get to decide. You as free people get to decide which powers you're going to delegate to the government. Instead of the government telling you what you can do, what you're going to do through the formation of this government, ultimately the Constitutional Convention, you are going to shape what this government, how it operates, what it can do, what powers you have delegated to it. And it flipped everything on its head. Again, I've said before, Americans are not subjects, they are citizens. Americans are free people. Now, the truth is, people around the world were all created to be free, but their government, their dictators, their ruling classes have inserted themselves as those who are not simply those who are following accepting the role that the people gave them. They are going to exceed their role and do what they want to see happen, implement policies, or just arbitrarily change things. This has happened throughout history, ruling with an iron fist, and people have gone along with this. Right? We don't have a king in America. We have the rule of law. We have a constitutional republic. We have people who are supposed to represent us, and if they don't, we can do something about it at the ballot box, not at the end of a firearm. And that's where this thing goes awry. And what happens is, human nature, we've gone through this before. The left has no answer for human nature. The left refuses to accept what human nature is, constantly getting it 180 degrees out of whack, constantly telling us the exact opposite. I mean, I could go through the examples. I won't right now because I want to get to these things that I talked about. But just as one example, the left tells us when it comes to human nature and personal responsibility, the left tells us that we're all collectively responsible for everything that goes wrong in this country in some sort of indirect, ambiguous sort of way. But yet no one, unless you're a conservative, unless you're Donald Trump, unless you're a Christian, but no one, minus their exceptions, is actually responsible for their own actions. This is how the left operates. This is why people commit heinous crimes and liberal activist judges give them community service or some such things, or ridiculously small, short sentences. There's no justice there. But when it comes to, say, their perspective on climate change and how man is responsible, you better believe that you and I are being blamed for this because we're driving SUVs and we're eating beef, and beef allows there to be cattle roaming the countryside, and cattle have flatulence and create methane gas, all this ridiculous stuff. And this is just, it's nonsensical. It's nonsensical. But yet when someone does something criminal, they're quick to defend these folks, these lunatics. Anyway, but I don't want to get into that today. There's many, many examples of that. I won't get into that. But the point here is that human nature, we all have a yearning, a desire to be free because we've been created to be free. But then there's this other battle, this war within us. And if we're being honest, humanity has shown this time and time again, that there is an inclination of the human heart to be attracted to power. And we've seen this time and time and time again. I don't know how many times we need to see this. I hear people talking about communism, and they try to disassociate the fact that communism is, in practicality, always authoritarian. I just read something about this earlier today. Communism is always authoritarian. Give me an example of a communist society that did not have an authoritarian. It does have authoritarians, even in spite of the fact of all the things that it talks about, perfect equality and all this sort of stuff. Those things never happen because of the elixir, the intoxication of power. That's what happens. And humanity, people who are given power, they like power for power's sake. It fuels the ego. It fuels our pride. In fact, if you've ever read C.S. Lewis, he talks about pride being the great sin. This is what we see. This is what is repeated throughout history. And so what happens is, if you have a group of people that are insistent on following the Constitution, as I know many of you are, I hope all of you are, but common sense tells me that there's some out here that are not on board with this yet. For whatever reason, you're learning. Why? It's fine. But it's not fine if we don't understand and get to the point where we say we are insistent that we remain free and that government stays within its proper role, its proper function. Because if it doesn't, as it never will, when left to its own devices, I've said this before, I'll say it again. It is when God created humanity. God created us. Remember, we're made in the image of God. And the first thing we know about God in the Bible, if we start in Genesis, is that God is creative. And we have not the creative ability of the God of the universe, but we have a portion of that, a little reflection of his creativity. And so we are creators. We are builders. God created humanity to rule over the earth. And that's why we build things. We build families, we build communities, we build churches, we build cities, we build governments, businesses, everything that you can think of, we're building. And that's a good thing in general. But the problem is when we build a government and we leave it to its own devices, it will become, just because of human nature, it will become, at some point left unchecked, the default is more authoritarian, more we're the boss, we have the power, you're going to do what we say. So we have to stay vigilant. And so there are the forces that want government to grow because government grows and they promise to give us things. If you vote for me, you'll get free this, you'll get free health care, free education, you won't have anything to worry about. And so there's those forces. And I'm telling you, you read the manifesto of this lunatic, this alleged lunatic here, the alleged assassin. If you read it, you'll see elements of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's really kind of maybe partly what you would think from someone who came up with this sort of ridiculous plan of action here. But he's going in with some grievances, and I think you get at least pause and think this guy doesn't like what Trump is doing, obviously. And you begin to think that this guy, you can see where he has a different expectation of government, where he sees Trump as being a direct threat to whatever he thinks government should be doing. And I think it's a fair fair assumption or a fair step to say this guy thinks that Trump is preventing there from being some degree of American utopianism that would be ushered in by the political left. I think that you could at least pause and consider that that's what his mind was thinking. And so here you go. You got people who want and desire for this government to grow because of the promises that have been pushed out there by politicians and so forth. This picture of, well, they say it's reality, but it's not reality. And then they're upset at people that want to step in and interfere with government-provided services that are supposed to put us on the fast track to this utopia. And you can at least see how the tension exists. They view people who want a limited government as part of the problem. Now, they'll also go on the offensive and say that Trump is, of course, evil and Hitler and everything else. I'm saying there's certainly layers to this. This is sophisticated, and it's by nature confusing because the people who are committing these sorts of heinous acts are confused intellectually, psychologically, certainly spiritually. And so here we find ourselves. Here we find ourselves in this particular situation. And so Karoline Leavitt, I want to square this up before we get to the next segment. Karoline Leavitt took to the podium yesterday on Monday to basically name names and say Democrats out there have been fueling this sort of stuff for the people who are not spiritually well, or if you want to say well from a mental health perspective, fine. And so she goes a little bit, she goes after him. She goes after him. So we'll talk about that next segment. Friends, let's face it, living with discomfort is tough. And while prescription medications can help, they often come with a long list of side effects, not to mention the risk of dependency. That's why more people are exploring natural options like Kratom from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. They are a family-run company. They do things the right way. They work directly with Indonesian farmers. They lab test every batch to make sure it is pure and clean. No synthetics, no chemicals, no surprises, just honest, natural kratom that's been used for generations. So, do your research. Once you decide it's something you'd like to do, give it a try. Start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Code Todd Huff will save you 10% on your first order. Again, Todd Huff saves you 10% on your first order. Christopher's Organic Botanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency, and yes, time out for me, my friends. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Before I play the clip of Karoline Leavitt naming names or blaming the Democrat Party for getting us to this particular point, I do want to play a soundbite, or maybe I'll just read the caption or the transcript here of SE Cupp. SE Cupp is a contributor on CNN, and she was about 20 minutes before the attempted assassination Saturday night. She was on CNN talking about, of course, the context of the dinner is it's a dinner about the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. Of course, there's 4 freedoms in the First Amendment: freedom of speech, the freedom of press, which the press is there, so they're going to have a little bit of fun. But she's saying, look, it's kind of ironic that the press is going to do this event with this guy, Donald Trump, and Donald Trump wants them metaphorically, that's not the word, figuratively, she said. Figuratively, he wants us, referring to journalists, dead. That's what she said. 20 minutes, I think it was 20 minutes before the event. I referenced this yesterday. I didn't have time to get to this yesterday, so I'm going to play it today because I promised you that we would talk about this, and I'll get on to Karoline Leavitt's comments here afterward. But here's SE Cupp just about 20 minutes before the attempted assassination of President Trump and his cabinet on Saturday night.
Planned this scenario better. And guess what? He didn't. We did. Journalism planned this scenario for Donald Trump. So if I'm Donald Trump, of course I come under these conditions. And you just heard Brian Stelter say that the Correspondents Association was trying to sort of mend some fences with the guy who wants us dead, figuratively. Figuratively, he wants journalism dead. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't think this is a great night for journalism.
Oh, get a life. Get a life. Who wants who dead, by the way? How many attempted, literal, not figuratively, SE Cupp? How many literal assassinations have happened of President Donald J. Trump? How many plans for assassinations? How many things have happened that we don't even know about? We know the Iranians have been planning, hoping to take out President Trump. How many really are there? I would hate to candidly form a guess here because it's a lot. She says Trump, it's ironic. It's not a good night for journalism, she says, because Trump wants journalism dead. That's what she says. He wants journalism dead. It's so pathetic and it's so boring. I mean, is this the best that you've got? Just because Trump has spats with you, he doesn't want journalism dead. I mean, my goodness, he deals with these clowns and jokers each and every day. This is, it's just really a bad, pathetic take. And it comes across, candidly, if I can say so, like they're a bunch of little childish babies over here because they don't like President Trump. So anyway, I told you that I was going to play Karoline Leavitt. She steps to the podium yesterday on Monday, and she calls out some people by name in the Democrat Party for contributing to the rhetoric, to the metaphorical, SE Cupp, figurative temperature in the room here, which, by the way, has been increased in part, maybe large part, by some of these politicians she's mentioning, Karoline Leavitt here is mentioning, and also by many of the people that you sit around with and pontificate with and talk politics with that have undoubtedly been invited to CNN. I mean, there have been some terrible things that have been said about President Trump. I just mentioned we've got a Todd talk. I don't know if it's today's or tomorrow's, but Jimmy Kimmel, you may have seen this. I don't want to say too much about this now, but Jimmy Kimmel did a bit last week. Now, in fairness, it was on Thursday, I believe, but he was doing a bit on the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and he was kind of pretending he was there, and he made a comment about Melania having the radiance of a widow. You know, you look radiant like a widow or some such thing, and that draws laughs. And what would make Melania a widow? I mean, this is for the low information crowd out there. This is for the people who find that sort of thing comical. What makes Melania a widow is the death of her husband. How is that a joke? How is the death of the President of the United States something to joke about? Why? What is funny about that? These people are morally bankrupt clowns. But anyway, let's get to Karoline Leavitt here, calling people out. I'm just going to play this. You can enjoy this. She goes right after them, for sure.
Not just the media, it is the entire Democrat Party has made their pitch to voters across the country that Donald Trump poses an existential threat to democracy, that he is a fascist, and that they compare him to Hitler. I mean, these are despicable statements that the American people have been consuming for years. And so many mentally perturbed individuals are led to believe these words are truth and then are inspired to act on it. I have a whole host of examples that we can share with you after. It is pages and pages of major Democrat Party elected officials saying, such as Rep. Hakeem Jeffries just this month said, "We are in an era of maximum warfare everywhere all the time." Governor Josh Shapiro said heads need to roll within the administration. Senator Alex Padilla said people are, quote, dying because of fear and terror caused by the Trump administration. Senator Elizabeth Warren, President Trump is making the country look like a, quote, fascist state. Senator Adam Schiff saying President Trump using a dictator playbook. Senator Ed Markey calling President Trump a dictator, saying that this administration's actions are authoritarianism on steroids. Governor J.B. Pritzker, never before in my life have I called for mass protest disruptions. These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. You have Rep. Presley saying, we'll see you in the streets. Rep. Monica McIver, a Democrat representative on Capitol Hill, we will not take this from Donald Trump. He thinks he's a dictator. We are at war. These are Democrat elected officials calling for war against the President of the United States and his supporters. I could go on, but again, when you have people in positions of power that are saying things like this every single day for years, you are inspiring violence by people who are already mentally ill. And that's what we've seen against this president for far too long.
Well, and she's not wrong there. Now, some of those I would say I think is metaphorical. I understand that when the temperatures are high, you might want to think more carefully about what you're saying, especially when the president of the United States has been the target of now multiple assassinations. The first, of course, literally striking him in the ear. And of course, there are people out there that still don't believe it. They say it's staged. They say this weekend's was staged and everything else. Okay, I mean, listen, the mind will justify what the heart desires, right? I mean, that's ultimately, I think, the lesson here. Certainly we should question things and be skeptical, healthy skepticism anyway. But these are real assassinations on our real president's life. He's really being targeted. It's not hard to understand why, because what she's saying here, at the core of what she's saying here, she's absolutely 100% correct. The problem here is that for a decade, people have been stirred up. I've talked about this for some time. People have been stirred up into a frenzy. They've listened as the president of the United States has been accused of everything conceivable, right? He's been accused of being a rapist. In fact, I'm not going to have time to get to the manifesto, I don't think. Maybe we'll try to read some of it next segment, but you'll see that language is in the manifesto that's been shared with us, released. But that's not true. People say, "Oh, it's been proven in court that he was a rape." No, it's not. People don't. It's amazing to me. Civil court and liabilities versus criminal court; those are not the same things. If you think the president is a rapist, I even hate to say those words on the radio. If you think that, then and you make that statement, and he decides to sue you. You better be prepared to prove it, and you're going to have a heck of a time. I'm not saying he's going to sue individual citizens, maybe if CNN says it or something like that. But anyway, just this, Karoline Leavitt is right. I'll talk more about it after the break, but I got to get to that timeout. Friends, our investments are like seeds that we plant. They grow, they multiply, but are they bearing the kind of fruit that we want? That's not just, it is the financial reward, right? The growth of the investment, the dividend of the investment. But it's also the type of values we support in our society. 4-8 Financial believes that our money should reflect our values. That's why they specialize in wealth management and biblically responsible investing, where they can screen out companies that don't align with your faith. It's all part of the purpose-centered financial planning, helping you live a life of purpose and meaning. If you want to see if your investments align or to what degree they align with your values, go to 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd. Quick timeout, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Time flies here. I would say as you're having fun. I don't know that we're having fun. I mean, we're having fun, I guess, but it's very precarious times that we are living through. These lunatics that are out there. Now, I will say this, Karoline Leavitt's point that the Democrats, the media as well, I don't know, in that clip, she didn't specifically mention the Democrat, or the media, I should say, but she's right, right? She's right to say that the rhetoric, and I don't think all the examples she listed are good. I do give people some freedom to use metaphorical language. I think she said Josh Shapiro said heads need to roll. I mean, that's a term that's used. I think we're maybe overly sensitive to that. That's not meant to be literal, but to say repeatedly, as to her point, and she's right here, the Democrats have been saying for the better part of a decade now that Trump, first of all, he stole the election, right, of 2016. He colluded with Vladimir Putin, his buddy. He went to the Kremlin. He probably was drinking vodka in a smoke-filled room, and they came up with a plan, a ploy to steal the 2016 election by tricking Hillary voters into voting for Trump by using some Facebook ads, some Pokemon Go ads, some ads on what was known as Twitter at the time that just tricked them, fooled them into voting for Trump. And how did they do that? Well, they went to the experts on America, media consumption, American politics inside the Kremlin. They couldn't find any people here in the United States who would, of course, Trump, there were Trump's buddies here as well. But apparently, Trump and the shady cast of characters he dealt with here wasn't mean and dirty enough. He had to go to the Kremlin. And they gave him a team of social media marketers who could trick, again, Hillary supporters into thinking they were Donald Trump supporters on Election Day. And that's what happened. They told us that's where it started. Then it just kept going, and it's still going. They've impeached the guy twice. They have made criminal charges, civil court charges. They have tried everything conceivable to take this man down. And going back to Trump's statements earlier in the program, this is what happens. He's right on this. This is what happens. You're the target when you're someone who wants to get things done, and when you're someone who, I talked about the nature of government is to grow, and some people benefit from that growth because it takes from people who produce. And it's a tool where you can tell your government, take from them, give to me so that I can have all these things. And if you don't allow that, if you're a politician like Trump or like a conservative who interferes with that, you're viewed as the problem. You're the one who is preventing them from living their life. You're causing death and destruction and tumult and chaos in society because you won't participate in the process. And therefore you, I guess in the extreme cases here, they think that because you're ruining life for other people or even for them, you deserve to be targeted, and executed and shot. That's what this lunatic thinks. I'll read a bit of this. I won't get through all of it. And I've got this posted again in the stack of stuff. This is what's reported to be the full manifesto. The full manifesto of the alleged assassin here. I'll read part of it. Hello, everybody! Exclamation point. So I may have given a lot of people a surprise today. Let me start off by apologizing to everyone whose trust I abused. That's going to take you a while, knucklehead. But anyway, I apologize to my parents for saying I had an interview without specifying it was for Most Wanted. I apologize to my colleagues and students. You did your students a favor by getting out of their lives, buddy. For saying I had a personal emergency. By the time anyone reads this, I probably most certainly do need to go to the ER, but can hardly call that not a self-inflicted status. I apologize to all of the people I traveled next to, all the workers who handled my luggage, and all the other non-targeted people at the hotel who I put in danger simply by being near. To these people, he thinks he's more, by apologizing and having good intentions, he thinks, for these other people walking around society, he's doing the right thing here. This is wild stuff. I apologize to everyone who is abused and or murdered before this. Okay, they're not, just whatever. To all those who suffered before I was able to attempt this. There you go. Where'd that go? Before I was able to attempt this. Sorry, the window jumped. Oh, to all who may still suffer after, regardless of my success or failure. See, he's talking about those very people who suffered because Trump's president. Sorry I didn't do it sooner is basically what he's saying. I don't expect forgiveness, but if I could have seen any other way to get this close, I would have taken it. Again, my sincere apologies. On why I did any of this, I am a citizen of the United States of America. What my representatives do reflects me, and I am no longer willing to permit a pedophile, his words not mine, rapist and traitor to coat my hands with his crimes. Well, to be completely honest, I was no longer willing a long time ago, but this is the first real opportunity I've had to do something about it. Again, the stupid manifesto I'm reading here. While discussing this, I'll also go over my expected rules of engagement, probably in a terrible format. I'm not military, so too bad. I mean, this is real. This is his stupid manifesto. He got objections in here. I'm just out of time. I knew I wouldn't get through this. It's in the stack of stuff. You can get that by texting TRUTH to 317-785-1030. But I got to go, my friends. Thanks for listening. SDG.